Good evening and welcome to the open house for the 101 improvements. I'm Steve DeGeorge. I'm the planning director for the Ventura County Transportation Commission. The VCTC, as our friends know us, and you may know us best for our big blue buses that go up and down the highway and connect the cities. It probably doesn't come as a surprise to any of you that we're here to talk about the 101 tonight. It's getting a little crowded out there. It's getting a little tougher to get down the hill to Camarillo or into the valley. So it's really time that we're here to talk to you. And we're looking at improvements on the 101 from Highway 23 here in Thousand Oaks to Highway 33 in Ventura. And we're hoping to have a conversation with you tonight about all the improvements we hope to make. Tonight we have a team of experts with us, and these experts are going to walk you through the project and the process. They're going to tell you about the improvements we hope to make and all the steps that are necessary to get us through the environmental process. But after they tell you that, they're here to listen to you. And the session tonight is really about your input to us. Now, the experts are going to walk you through all of the steps, the alternatives, how these are not the alternatives, the only alternatives that you'll see on the board, that there's opportunity for other alternatives, and they're going to explain to you how that's going to work. They're going to talk to you about the environmental process and all of the various steps and agencies involved in that. But most importantly, these folks are here to listen to you tonight, that your input will shape what the final project is. And that's really what this evening is about. So it's really very important that you take the time, give us your input. You can do it through a court reporter here. You can fill out a comment card. You can mail it to us. You can email us. But it's really important that we hear from you tonight. And that is the whole reason we're here. We're at the very beginning of this process, and we really need to hear from you. Now, I'm going to turn this over to our first expert, Mr. Vic Martinez. He's our project manager, the man who is responsible to make this whole thing happen from beginning to end. So Vic's going to walk us through the next series of slides.
All right, thank you, Steve. So let me first operate this thing here. So happy to be here, and our team. I'm going to turn over to our team later on so they can hear what they have to say. And of course, as Steve indicated, we'll here to answer all your questions as best we can here. So, looking at the history of the 101, it was constructed first in the 1950s. And some parts of the corridor through Thousand Oaks has been improved, but for the majority of the corridor, it really hasn't been improved except for certain areas, where some interchanges and other works have gone in. So largely, though, it hasn't been improved, and so therefore, that's why you've seen traffic really become a problem over the years. So we're going to be working with VCTC to look at implementing these vital improvements along the 101. So these changes will help move traffic or people more efficiently, reduce congestion, and of course, one of our main goals is making sure that we minimize any environmental impacts. So looking at the study area, as Steve was indicating, the corridor starts in and around State Route 33 in the city of Ventura. And as we go down the corridor, we'll go through the city of Oxnard, the city of Camarillo. A little bit of the county of Ventura is also touched upon there, unincorporated part, and then the city of Thousand Oaks. This is a distance of approximately 27 miles. Now, as you can imagine, with a corridor of this size, there's a lot of things that we need to address, a lot of things we need to look at. And as we look at putting the funding together, one of the things is most likely, as we develop a plan, this is going to be built in phases all over the years as funding becomes available. So that's a key element I want to make sure that we point it out. Now what I'd like to do is I'm going to turn over to Vigan Davidian, who's going to go through some of the traffic issues along the corridor.
Steve called us experts in the matter. Yes, we are. But you live with this freeway every day. Morning, afternoon, midday. We really don't need to tell you that there are issues. There's congestion, there's bottlenecks, there's deficiencies along the corridor, especially where you are in Thousand Oaks on the eastern end of the project corridor in and around the 23 freeway. As you can see, we have tools, we have ways to really analyze, and that's what we're going to do. We're actually going to quantify what the congestion is like, what the delays are like, where the bottlenecks are, where traffic breaks down in the morning, which is an indication here, or in the evening, which is this one here. One of the things that we will do, we will identify what the current problems are, and we also are looking at the future because we're building for the future. We're planning this for the future. So if we don't do anything, that's what it's going to look like. It's going to look much worse than what you have today. We're going to quantify that. How much worse? We'll quantify that. We'll identify if you're sitting in traffic for half an hour or an hour going, 10 miles, we're going to identify how much longer it's going to take 20 years from now, 40 years from now, if nothing is done. So that's sort of the basis of our analysis. It's the starting points for looking at what needs to be done and where it needs to be done. Because, one solution is probably not going to be the solution for the whole corridor. There's going to be a series of things. Maybe we're looking at an HOV lane here throughout the whole corridor, but we also will be looking at spot improvements where it's necessary. And our traffic data and our forecasts and projections are going to tell us that. These are some of the things that we do: analyze levels of service, analyze the capacity, look at the bottlenecks, look at the traffic breakdowns, if you're, again, as I said, if today you're looking at an hour to get from here to there, where are the problems and how much worse it's going to get? Freeway operations. And then we're going to get to options. We're going to look at the different options that are available to us, given the constraints that we have. So in order to get to those, I'm going to turn it over to Vic again here and go to the next slide.
Thanks, Vigan. Thank you. So again, looking at, every time we analyze a project from an environmental perspective and what's needed, we have to look at what's the purpose and need. So the purpose is to reduce existing congestion. As some of you know, as you try to go into Camarillo, the orange and the really red portion you're seeing there is, what a lot of you become known as the Camarillo or the Conejo crawl, the Conejo, congestion there. So we're looking at improving that, improving traffic operations at the interchanges, as a lot of things are caused by traffic coming onto the freeway and exiting the freeway. So we're going to be looking at that. And of course, as Vigan indicated as well, the accommodating future traffic volumes will be forecasted along the area. The need is that various parts of the corridor are not working very well. There F indicates that it's really traffic jammed to C, which means it's moving a little bit better. That's caused a lot because the region population has increased about 45% since 1990, and is anticipated, as you see in some of those maps, based on the projections, to further increase. So we've been working for almost a year now with all the corridor communities, including the county of Ventura. Tuesday night, we gave a presentation to the city of Ventura, same one you're seeing here tonight. Last night, we were with the city of Oxnard. And of course, tonight we're here. And then Monday night, we'll be in the city of Camarillo. And again, the purpose of this is really to show you what we're looking at and to get your input. And you'll hear a lot about that through our various presenters. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Yosizumi, who's going to go through some of the alternatives that have been previously studied.
All right, great. Thanks, Vic. Yes, as Vic just said, we have some alternatives that were already studied in some previous project planning, some early planning stages. And that's what we'll talk about right now. That's what you see on the boards back here. But again, to reiterate what Steve DeGeorge said earlier, these are not the only alternatives. This is what has been talked about up to date, but we're here tonight to hear from you about your thoughts about what the problems are, what the issues are in this area, as well as what the possible solutions might be. So I'll tell you what has been talked about, but these are not the limit of the alternatives for this project. All right? So the first one that's up here on the screen is the no build or the existing condition. It's existing, as you can see. It matches what is in most of the section of 101, 3 lanes in each direction. And it's called the no build for the future because this is what it would still look like if we don't do anything, if we don't have a new solution, if we don't build something to try to improve travel in this corridor. So it's called the no build. And we study this alternative because it gives us a baseline to understand what the future of the 101 would look like if nothing is done. So we understand what the level of traffic is, what the noise is, what the air quality might be like in the future if nothing is done in the no build condition. Okay? So we do usually study this as one of our alternatives, so we can use it to compare other alternatives and see if they make things better, what aspects of the corridor are improved and by how much. The next alternative that's already been discussed is what's called the non-standard HOV. So who knows what an HOV lane is? Okay, a lot of people. So HOV, high occupancy vehicle, carpool lane, diamond lane, goes by a lot of names, but that's what it is. And it sounds like most people know what that is already. We have the term non-standard up there, and if you were to go to the website, you could see a little bit more about what that means. But I'll describe that in this case, non-standard means that we have a less than full-size left shoulder in some locations, and possibly a less than full-size travel lane, carpool lane in some locations. There are other parts of the corridor where we might have a full standard lane where the existing median is wider so that we can still maintain standard lane widths and standard left shoulder widths. But there are some places, and you're probably all familiar with it right here in Thousand Oaks, where you have 10-foot left shoulder. So if we try to put a 12-foot lane on a 10-foot shoulder, it doesn't work. So you need to have a little bit narrower left shoulder, a little bit narrower lanes. The reason we look at this as an option, as an alternative, is to avoid impacting properties that are right next to the freeway. You can kind of see over there on the far side where it indicates the existing right-of-way. So that's the existing Caltrans property. This alternative tries to stay as much as possible within the existing state freeway right-of-way, so it does not impact as many properties as some of the other alternatives that we'll talk about next. Okay, so that's the reason why we evaluate an alternative like this. The next one I'll talk about is called standard HOV. So again, it's a carpool lane, but in this case, it maintains that standard left shoulder, just like you have right now out here in Thousand Oaks on the 101, 10-foot left shoulder, standard lane widths. But what that means, of course, is that if you want to add a lane to an existing freeway, you need to widen on the outside. So this alternative includes widening to the outside of the freeway, and it may require acquiring property that's adjacent to the freeway in some locations. So you can see again over there, it says existing right-of-way, and then there's another line that says proposed right-of-way. So in some places along the corridor, there could be a need to acquire property. There are other places where we still would not need to acquire property because either the median is wide enough or there's still some existing property on the outside of the freeway. So if the freeway is widened, you still would stay within the existing state right-of-way. But there are definitely places where we would be looking at what property would be needed in order to build this typical section. Okay, so that's one standard HOV lane in each direction. The last of the 4 alternatives that have been talked about during the early planning phases is the 2 standard HOV lanes in each direction. So like the previous one, standard lane width, standard left shoulders, but in this case there's 2 carpool lanes in each direction instead of just 1. So why do we look at this as an alternative? Well, as Vigan was talking about the traffic analysis, we will be trying to determine what the level of usage of the carpool lane would be like. If you have enough vehicles that there needs to be 2 lanes in each direction in order to move all of the carpools that want to use it on any given day, then that would be why we would look at this as an alternative. If the traffic analysis shows that there isn't enough demand, or aren't enough vehicles that want to use a carpool lane, then this alternative may not be something that we would want to look at, because why would you build 2 lanes if you only need 1, right? Okay, so as I said, these are what has been talked about up to this point. These are not the final alternatives. Steve said the same thing. We are very much interested in hearing from you to understand what your thoughts are on what the problems are, and if you have ideas about potential solutions. That's why we're here tonight. If you want to fill out a comment card, if you want to talk to us, if you want to talk to the court reporter, please do. But we're very much interested in your ideas on what the problems are as well as what the solutions are. All right, so I'll hand it off to Mike to talk about the environmental process.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm here to talk about the environmental review process. It's one of the bigger reasons why we're here tonight. We are going through the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, as well as the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. We are in the process of getting started on this project, and we're at the public scoping period. Really, as we've mentioned, to hear your ideas on the alternatives and design options that might fix some of the things that you see out there every day, but also to hear about environmental issues that you feel are important to the community, to yourselves, and to the environment as a whole. The environmental document that we'll be preparing is going to be an EIR, Environmental Impact Report for CEQA, and an EA, Environmental Assessment for NEPA. The purpose of that is to analyze the project alternatives. Again, what we're going to be talking about here tonight, we have the preliminary alternatives, and we want to hear more ideas. It informs the decision makers, the folks at Caltrans, who is the lead agency for the environmental process, and VCTC, who is the sponsoring agency for the project. It's informing those decision makers and the public as a public disclosure document, and disclosing the impacts of the project and identifying where we can minimize and reduce those impacts as much as possible. And it also requires interagency coordination at the federal level and the state level. Resource agencies such as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, California Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps of Engineers, they will all be involved in this process as we get started here right now through the environmental document. The notice of preparation is really what kicked off this scoping period. The notice of preparation is required for an environmental impact report, an EIR. It provides a brief description of the project, the location, and where documents can be found related to the project. We have the project website, which is a great resource, which is one of our primary points of where to go to find information, but also tonight, providing your comments, getting on the sign-in sheet to where we can reach out to you on a regular basis. This is one of our first touch points with the public through the scoping process, and what we want to do is make sure we keep reaching out. So after we're done with the technical studies and getting into the environmental document, which is a little ways off, we want to make sure everybody is involved throughout the process, not just at 1 year or 2 year increments. It notifies the responsible agencies and other interested parties about the project, Native American groups as well. And it solicits input regarding the scope and content of the environmental document. And it was distributed for public review, and the comment period for this scoping period ends on May 6th. So we really need to have your comments either turned in tonight or mailed in, or go on the website, turn them in through the website. We have a court reporter as well. We also have a translator here tonight for any folks that need translation services as well. Environmental documents A to Z. This is essentially the disciplines and the topics that will be covered in the environmental document. Everything from air quality to biological resources, wildlife connectivity. I know that on the Conejo Grade we do have a wildlife corridor that will be evaluated through this process. Construction impacts. What is going to happen during that construction period, that construction time frame? We'll be looking at detours, where that traffic may go if there are any lane closures, ramp closures during construction. We'll be talking about that and evaluating that in the environmental document. Land acquisition and displacements, whether residential or business. We don't have that information yet. We're still evaluating the alternatives, so we're not sure exactly what right-of-way might be required for the project. But that process, that topic will be disclosed to the public through the environmental document. Noise and vibration, sound walls. A lot of folks obviously live up against the freeway or near the freeway. Sound walls will be evaluated with the new project alternatives to ensure that that noise attenuation, the reduction of that noise through those sound walls is analyzed and completed as part of the project. Section 4F and 6F. I always like to bring this one up because it's not something people hear or see all the time. Section 4F and Section 6F are a federal requirement because we're doing NEPA, and it's related to evaluating impacts to recreation, publicly owned recreation resources, publicly owned preserves, and publicly accessible lands like schools. If a Little League is using a school playground for their league, that becomes a 4F resource and has to be evaluated. And there are special mitigation measures around 4F and 6F. And then wildfire, that's actually a new CEQA requirement, is to evaluate wildfire protection as well as wildfire potential, possibly benefits of a project such as this for access for firefighters and emergency crews. The timeline, we've talked about that a little bit. We're right here. Oops, it's not showing up on the screen, so I'll do this one. We're at the beginning. We're at the very beginning of this, and we want to hear your input. Our next touch point through the process is through the draft environmental document, which is targeted spring, summer 2021. But we're not going to go dark for that time period. We're going to be reaching out to you on a regular basis through commission meetings, through council meetings, through community groups, working with VCTC and Caltrans to make sure that we're reaching out and giving folks updates. Your input counts. Really, we're serious that this is something that we want folks to understand, that the alternatives that we're looking at today are not the only alternatives on the table. There are options that we can look at moving forward, but also want to hear from you as far as your environmental concerns. So really, please, I encourage you to write down your comments and submit them. Another information source as far as submitting your comments. And again, May 6th is the deadline to submit comments. I think Steve wanted to close.
Thanks so much, Mike. Okay, so I think you got the message that our experts want to talk to you. I think if nothing else, you know that they want, I think they're lonely, but they want your input. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. It's so important to our process to have people take a project and take development within their community seriously. I want to thank Council Members Engler and Bill Della Pena for supporting this project and supporting you in your input. It means a lot to have their input to us, just as much as they're residents and users of the freeway. So it's critical to have their input as well, but we're really happy that you're here. So now please go talk to those folks who are standing there waiting for you. Look at them back there. They really need something to do. So thank you all for coming. Go talk to our experts.